Hey y'all, I'm Mickey Gousset, and welcome back to the ongoing series of Introduction to GitHub Actions. So, a couple of quick updates on me. Yes, it's very cold here in Tupelo, Mississippi right now. And yes, my hand is still splinted, which means that you're going to see me fumble around a lot more than normal when doing some of these videos. So, a couple of quick updates before I jump into what we're doing today. First off, I've been talking about doing kind of a live Q&A kind of thing on Twitch or YouTube Live or something like that. I think I'm going to try to maybe do a dry test run of it next week. So, keep watching my socials or subscribe to the YouTube channel because I'll put it in the communities thing there as well. But I think I'm going to just give it a run, give it a try. Again, I haven't used any of these streaming platforms before, so, could be a interesting experience, but I thought we'd give it a go. And second off, I had something else to tell you. Oh, I've had people asking me what I do at GitHub. Now, this channel is all me. It's all mine. This is not, all opinions here expressed on my own. But I do work on what's called the fast track team at GitHub. So we go out to customers that qualify for the program for 1 to 2 weeks at a time and help them, I call it, get more DevOpsy with GitHub, which means it could be anything from helping them get it set up to helping them do something with actions or advanced security or pretty much anything related to GitHub that they want to try to do. Our team kind of drops in and helps out. So that's why I love doing all this stuff and I really enjoy it. But you're here to talk about actions. And specifically, I have promised you to finally start getting into our real world example with the GitHub Actions workflow. So here's the scenario. We work at a company where we can't push to the main branch. We do all of our changes on a feature branch or, a branch, and then we need to pull request that back to the main branch. Now, we have a requirement that the pull request has to build, or the changes have to build and tests have to run and pass before we can merge. So we need to create a workflow that's going to run when we create a pull request or when the pull request is updated that will try to build the code, and then based off of that we'll run tests, and then if that passes, I'm allowed to merge the code. So we're going to break this into multiple pieces, right? We're not going to worry about what happens once we push to main. Right now, we're just worried about the pull request. So in this video, we're going to look at the workflow file and how we build the workflow file that's going to do the build and the test of our code, and we're going to see it in action. Now, in the video after this one, we're going to look at how you can use repository rule sets to make that workflow required so that we're blocking the merge until the tests pass. But for this video, we're just going to look at how we can create a workflow that will run on a pull request. So let's see what we can get into. All right, let's switch over to showing our desktop. So as usual, here we are in my DevOps Elvis organization, and in the repository My GitHub Actions presentation. You're going to find, if you go look in this organization, I have 2 or 3 different GitHub Action presentation repos, but this is the one that is the main one. I'll try to clean up some of the other ones and get them out of the way in case so that you don't get confused. But this is the repo that we've been demoing from through this entire series. Now, first thing we need to do is go create our workflow that we're going to use to run on our pull request. So I've already created the workflow, but if we go into the GitHub folder and we go into the workflows folder, I have a pull request, prbuildtest.yaml. Well, I have a file, not a pull request. And this is my workflow that's going to run on a pull request. So here you can see we've given it a name. We're specifying that this is going to run on a pull request to the main branch. Now, there's a lot of qualifications you can put here. You could say it just runs on any pull request to any branch. You can, in this case, I'm qualifying it to where it only runs on a pull request to the main branch. But you could also say, and I only want it to trigger if I modified folders in a certain file, or files in a certain folder. Or maybe I don't want to trigger for these branches or for these files, but I do want to trigger for these other files. So you've lots of different options for how you want to make this trigger. But in this case, I'm basically saying trigger on a pull request to the main branch. So that means this is going to trigger on the creation of the pull request. If I push another commit to the branch while the pull request is active, it'll trigger again, which is kind of what I want to do. And then I also included a workflow dispatch event just in case I wanted to run this manually. Now, we have one job in this workflow, and we call it build. We're running on Ubuntu latest, and then we get to our steps. Now, the first step, we need to check out the code. Now, if you'll check out my previous video about the GitHub Marketplace, which I'll try to remember to link somewhere up here, we talked about the fact that to access actions from the marketplace, or even actions that you're using or you've built and you're using internally, you use the uses statement, and then you provide the organization and the repository where that action lives, and then a version of the action that you want to use, whether that version is a tag or a branch name or even a commit SHA. Now, I'm just using the basic checkout action. I'm not providing any of the extra parameters that are available to it if you were trying to get more specific with what you're trying to do. So I'm basically just checking out the code. Now, the next step in this process is I want to make sure that I'm set up using the correct version of .NET. So I've created a step called setup.NET Core, and I'm using another action from the actions team called setup.net. I'm using version 4.1.0 of that action. And then I'm also specifying with a with command a parameter that it takes, which is the version of .NET that I want to make sure is set up on my runner. Now, the hosted runners, in this case I'm using a Linux hosted runner, so one of GitHub's hosted runners in the cloud, have a lot of frameworks and all already set up on them. But if I was running this on, say, a self-hosted runner that didn't have the .NET framework on it, and I needed to have the .NET framework on it, I could use this action and it would download and set up the .NET framework for me as part of the workflow. So after I get done checking out the code and I get done setting up .NET, the next step is I need to do a .NET restore, so restore my dependencies. So I'm going to just do a run statement here. We've seen the run statements in our previous videos, so I'm just going to do a run statement where I'm going to say .NET restore, and then I say go to the GitHub workspace. So the GitHub workspace is where when I ran the checkout, that's by default where the code is checked out to. And then go into the source folder, find my solution file, and run a .NET restore. And if you'll remember, over here in my code, here's my source folder. And here's my solution that we're going to, doing a .NET restore. Oh, let me blow this up a little more. All right. After we do the .NET restore, we're going to do a .NET build. And in the .NET, so we're just going to run a .NET build against the solution, and we're going to pass in --no restore and do a configuration release on the .NET build. So this is going to build the code. Now, as you saw over here in my source folder, I've got both my web app and my tests area. So now next I'm going to run .NET test to just run my tests. And in this case, I'm going to scroll this over enough. I'm not doing a restore, I'm just running the tests, and then I'm logging those tests out as JUnit tests into an XML file called testresults.xml. So essentially, I'm going to run the test, and I'm outputting the test to an XML file. And the reason I'm doing that is I want to take this XML file and do something with it. Now, I could do something like, go store it in a repo, or go store it, make a GitHub Pages site out of it if I wanted to, or, email it off to somebody if I wanted to. But what I want to do instead is take the test results that are in that XML file, make them look prettier, and actually display them on the workflow run itself. So to do that, I'm going to use an action, another action created by GitHub called test summary. So I use the test summary action, and what this does is it takes an input, which is my test files, and then it outputs a markdown file. So it takes the test results, turns them into something a little bit nicer to look at, and outputs that as a markdown file, a summary.md file. You'll also notice that I have this set to always run. And that's because if the tests fail, then by default, all the steps after the test will skip. But I want to make sure that I grab the test results and display those test results. So I use the if always command, which we learned about a few videos ago, to make sure this step runs, which creates my markdown file with the test results looking a little bit nicer. Now, I need to put those test results somewhere. So we have this concept of what's called a job summary on the workflow page. So what you do is, in this case, I made a step and I called it add test results to the job summary. And then I just use a run command. And what you do is you take strings, you take values, and you put them into the GitHub step summary. So here I'm echoing the words test results into the GitHub step summary. Then I'm adding a blank line. And then I'm basically catting out the markdown file. So I'm taking the markdown file, catting it out, and sending that to the GitHub step summary as well, basically copying it into the step summary as well. So by sending stuff into the GitHub step summary, as you'll see, it's going to display on the workflow page and let us see those results. Now, we could always just go to the workflow log and look at the information that's in the log about the tests, but this is going to make it a little bit nicer experience. Finally, even though we're not doing a publish, like we're not doing a deployment, on the PR, we still want to generate the files that could have been deployed from this pull request and store them somewhere so that we can look at them, because it might be important to the developers to be able to look at those files and understand what's going on. So I do a .NET publish against my CS proj, creating a release, and sending the output to my web app. And then I need to take the files that are in that my web app folder that are going to be deployed and put them somewhere. Okay? So where do I put them? Well, you could put them in Artifactory. You could put them in Nexus. You could put them on a Azure storage account. Copy them off to a file share. You could put them anywhere you would like to. But what I'm going to do is actually store them with the workflow run. And I have an easy way to do this by using what's called the upload artifact action. Again, built by the GitHub team, actions upload artifact. And you want to make sure you're always using v4 or later, because in the fourth version of this action and in the point versions after that, it runs much faster and it's much more efficient. So I'm going to call this step, and then I'm going to say, this is the name I'm giving the artifact it's going to create up in GitHub. I want it to take all of the files in this folder and all the subfolders that might be in that folder that were output from the publish, and copy those up and then store them under this name, my app. And if I don't find any files, throw an error. So this final step will actually take the files that were created in the publish step and store them in the workflow file. Oh, and I forgot to mention, when I'm generating the job summary, you'll notice I also have it set to if always, so that it does always run even when there's a failure. All right, so let's go make a change to our application. So I'm going to come in here to my app. We'll go to Pages. We'll go to Shared. We'll go to the Layout. And let's make a quick change here to the layout to where we're just going to add another menu item to the layout here. So we'll tab this over so it looks pretty. And we're going to change it to, instead of saying privacy, we're going to say YouTube rocks. Well, told y'all I can't type with this splint on. YouTube rocks. So we're going to commit this change, and we're going to say added YouTube rocks. And we're going to create this on a new branch, and we'll call that new branch Mickey Gousset / YouTube demo. And we're going to create a pull request for this change. So that's going to create the branch and takes me to where I can create the pull request. So we'll have Copilot generate a summary for us. See what it tells us. There you go. That looks good to me. So we're going to create a pull request. Now, when we create this pull request, what we're going to see here in just a moment is our workflow against our PR that we just talked about that gets kicked off when a PR is created is starting to run. Now you'll notice it's not required. There's no word, nothing here making it required. We're going to look at how to do that in the next video. But the workflow is running. And if we dive over here into the details of the workflow, oh, we can see that the tests fail. Oh, I have a problem in my code. So you'll notice that, let's see if we come back up to the summary. The workflow itself has failed, right? We can see that because big red X. And we know that this job failed. And specifically, if we go into the job, we can see that we failed on the test step. Now, test summary and add to test results still ran, but then all the other steps were skipped as expected. And if we go into the test step, we can scroll down and we can see, all right, so we've got some tests that failed here. We've got some final information here that shows that two tests failed, 4 tests passed. Now, if I wanted to be able to point somebody directly to this spot in the log, I can actually, you'll see each of these is hyperlinkable. So I can right click on this and I can copy this link. And then if I come over to, say, another tab, and I paste that in, then it will open up and take me directly to that line. So this is a great way where, like, if you've got a failing job or failing step and you want somebody to look at it, you could send them a Slack message, send them an email, and link them directly to where you want them to go look at something. But while I can come in here into the failing job and see which test failed, remember I have these steps here that are creating this test summary for me. So if we go back up to the summary of the top of our workflow, we can see that it ran in 33 seconds. It was running against this particular branch. But here we can see that, oh, you had 4 tests, or we had 6 tests. 4 passed, 2 failed. Here's 3 that passed. Here's 2 that failed. Test 4 and test 5 failed. And then here's test 6. So this is a little bit nicer to be able to see the test results this way. There's other ways you could potentially display the test results as well, but this is the way I like to do it. So I guess we need to probably go fix those test results, or fix the reason the tests are failing. So let's go look at the tests first and see if we can find a good solution for those. So I'm going to go back into my source code. I'm going to go over to my tests. And then I'm going to do what all good developers do when their tests are failing. We're just going to go down to the tests that are failing, and we're going to comment them out. So I'll be curious to know the number of people that made it this far in the video. So leave a comment on the YouTube video if you think this is the right way to handle tests that are failing. Now, I'm not on the right branch, so let's switch over to my actual branch, discard these changes, and make those changes one more time. So we'll go over here to test 4, and we're going to comment out the failing tests. And we're going to commit our changes again. Fixed bad tests. Now, you'll notice that we're committing back to the branch that we made previously, and we have an open pull request against that branch. Because we have an open pull request against that branch, what you're going to notice is the workflow is going to run again. Now we can see that the workflow failed here against that change, and now we're running against the latest commit. So we can go to details, and let's see if we pass or fail this particular workflow run. Now ideally, if all the tests pass and all, then the next step would be to merge this, but we're not going to merge it in this video because we're going to look at how we can make that workflow required in the next video. So here you can see it all passed. All of our tests passed. And I want to draw your attention up here to we have one artifact. And if I click that, that takes me oh, my page locked up. There we go. So we can see that that Ubuntu latest is soon going to be using 22.4. But what I needed that to do was download the artifact for me. So let's see if that downloaded the artifact. Okay, so that did not download the artifact, so let's see what I'm doing wrong. Let's go back to the summary page one more time. Ah, there it is. I needed to refresh the page. That's the problem. So you can see under annotations, here is the artifact that we uploaded. So all of those published files. And if I click My App, this will actually download the file for me. And if I open it up, then we can see here's all the things that I need to deploy this application. So this shows me the published files that I could then use if I wanted to deploy, but I could have also used maybe to help me debug if I needed to, maybe why it wasn't building earlier. All right. And there you have it. At this point, we have a pull request that has the workflow that has passed. So if we go back to our pull request, we could merge this and start in this, go to the next step in our process. But we're going to stop here. All right. Now, what we're going to do, what we've learned is we've seen how we can trigger this to run on a pull request, how we can do builds, how we can do tests, how if we make another change and push another commit that it will rerun the workflows, so rerun the verifications, the build, and the test for us, which is great. So the next step is I want to make that required. I want to actually be able to block you from being able to merge that pull request until that workflow passes. And to do that, we're going to look at what's called repository rule sets. Now, we've had branch protection rules for the longest time, but repository rule sets are the successor to branch protection rules. So while the repository rule sets aren't necessarily completely related to GitHub Actions, they do tie into GitHub Actions. So the next video, we'll look at repository rule sets, how those tie into GitHub Actions. And then the video after that, we're going to actually take this code and merge it to main, which is then going to kick off another workflow that's going to do our deployments. So let me know if you've liked this video, if you found this video helpful. I would really appreciate it. Please leave me a comment. Please like the video. Please subscribe to the channel. Smash the bell for notifications. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on X. You can find me on Blue Sky. Please feel free to reach out to me. I would love to get feedback from you on what you think of this video, the whole series in general, and what you want to hear about in future videos. And finally, don't remember, I'm shooting for maybe Wednesday of next week, depending on how life goes, to try out to do maybe a 30-minute Q&A type of session where you come ask questions and I do my best to provide answers. Thanks for watching.